And welcome Aaron Heath from MobilityWorks to talk to us today about the do's and don'ts of power mobility. Take it away, Aaron.
Well, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Aaron Heath. I'm with MobilityWorks here in Waite Park, Minnesota. Beautiful St. Cloud area. So a little further north than some of you, but a little closer to Sioux Falls too. So it kind of works out. I'm in the middle. I've been in mobility and DME for, going on almost 10 years. I've worked a little bit out in pulmonology. So I've worked with a lot of lung doctors at the St. Cloud Hospital, as well as the Minneapolis HCMC. So I've kind of fell in love with helping people, and that's how I got into durable medical equipment. Unfortunately, working with COPD patients, life can be a little bit difficult. Working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and deciding to have a family was a little hard. So I got into working with medical equipment, and that's how I ended up here. The biggest thing I tell everybody when you're looking at medical equipment, I know we all tend to focus on what we're dealing with right now. I always say, let's plan for what's going to happen in a year, maybe 2 years, because we just don't know. And then we go and get the first thing that we find. So let's say we go get that wheelchair, and we can't get through the park we like to go to because we like to go outside and we want to do some stuff out there. That's where things can get a little bit difficult. Getting into an all-terrain wheelchair, which is one that can go out into the woods, and some people who like to hunt and do other sporting type things, those are generally not covered by insurance companies because the insurance companies are going to look for some key words. Medical necessity. They don't think about quality of life sometimes when they're coming up with these policies. So unfortunately, some of us who enjoy those outdoor activities, the wonderful things that we get to do here in Minnesota and the Dakotas and Wisconsin, we miss out on because they don't necessarily take that into account. Are there units you can get like that? Yes, there are. They do have some costs. They're not cheap. Anybody who's bought a powered wheelchair can attest. Even if the insurance paid for it, that was a big bill, wasn't it? So those are kind of the things that we have to kind of take into account when we're looking at things. One, what is medically necessary and deemed by your insurance company? So if you're going through a private insurance company, they're a little bit more lax on the rules. They will generally follow the Medicare guidelines as well as the Medicaid guidelines, but they're not always necessarily going to follow them exactly. Medicare is going to have some of the most stringent guidelines. They're very, very particular, especially with the wording that your doctors or your PTs use when they're prescribing you a device. They have to be very, very specific. So I'll use abnormality of gait. So the kind of the inability to keep your feet aligned so you can keep your balance as an example. That term is only going to qualify you for a manual wheelchair or like a manual walker. While those are great devices, they may not be a long-term solution for you. And that's where things get a little tricky because we want to start planning things. And mobility is a very, very important part of life. I know all of you can agree. If we couldn't leave one room ever, our quality of life goes down drastically and we would be very, very unhappy. So mobility is huge. And my job is to help find solutions for individuals to stay mobile, whether it be continuing to drive or wheelchairs and walkers and things like that. So we take a very needs analysis type approach to things. So that's kind of how I'm going to present today. So feel free to ask questions, but our goal here is to just kind of show you kind of how I break down what needs are to get it so we can have a good quality of life, and then kind of how to work the system a little bit to be able to get the devices you need. In some cases, insurance companies are just going to flat out tell you no. In the case of wheelchair vans, 99.9% of the time, they're going to flat out tell you no, because they're going to tell you there's a service that can pick you up and take you places and do those things for you. So those are where it gets difficult. However, wheelchairs, they do deem necessary because we do need to be able to get from, let's say, a bedroom to a kitchen or to a bathroom or something like that. And you have to have that ability or be the ability to go to a doctor. So that is a medical necessity. You have to be able to move around. It's weird how they don't necessarily see the distinction of having a vehicle to get from one place to the other, but you can have a powered wheelchair. So it's a little bit of a different situation you're kind of dealing with. So I'll use the example of the all-terrain wheelchair that we were talking about a little bit before we jumped on this recording as kind of my presentation point. So I'm not going to use names just for HIPAA purposes. It's just me. So I'm not trying to offend anyone. So just please bear with me if you could. With this all-terrain wheelchair request, if you were to present that to an insurance company right now, they are going to tell you no. That is more of a county waiver program or a donation program through a third party is what I would suggest to try to get into something like that. They generally are going to range anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000 for the ones that are pretty all-terrain. So let's say we'll use the example of you going to your physical therapist and saying, I need this device. They're going to tell you, okay, I can prescribe it to you. So you're not going to get a lot of help from your medical side of things because you're going to bring it to your insurance company and they're going to tell you no, because they're going to ask you, is this medically necessary? Unfortunately, they're going to say no. That's a difficult situation, but let's look at it at another way. I know one of the folks on the call here said that they had just gotten into a powered wheelchair recently. And they're hoping not to have to need any more equipment. But that process from going from like a manual chair or a walking assistance device, as long as we can show a progression with your diagnosis that's heading towards where mobility is going to become a challenge, then it becomes medically necessary to go into a mobility device that's powered. So it really comes down to your timeline. So I'm going to go and use this as an example here from the start. So I just diagnosed with ALS. I'm having difficulty walking. My doctor prescribed me a four-wheel rollating device, which is a walker with four wheels on it for now. I don't find that to be enough to last for me for a long-term scenario. So I'm looking at this from a patient side of things. I know that I'm struggling. It's getting more and more difficult every day. So I insist that the doctor talk to me about a wheelchair assessment. And then I have to go to my insurance company. And this is where some of the legwork comes in. And this is where it's nice having an advocate on your behalf to have a discussion with your insurance company. You may have to make phone calls even to Medicare to get approval. It is time consuming. When you're dealing with those types of situations, I generally suggest working with a DME company. Reliable Medical as an example is a great one that will go to bat for you and try to work with your insurance company to get you approved. Doing this all by yourself can be very difficult. And I know some of us who are single that we don't always have that extra person there or family nearby. So having an advocate on your behalf is huge. Mobility is a huge part of our lives. So when you're facing a challenge, you kind of have to have that extra help. Now we'll continue with my scenario. So I'm trying to get this powered wheelchair. And the reason I'm wanting a power wheelchair is because I know that things are not going to get better for me. I'm struggling more and more every day. So I'm asking for this device. So now I'm looking at getting this device. Here's some of the things that I have to think about. Will this device fit in my home? Can I continue to use my house? That's a huge, huge factor. I don't know how many people I've seen get a power wheelchair and it doesn't fit in their house. It essentially eliminates the purpose of the chair. The chair is to give you freedom and mobility. The other thing is, how do I move this chair around? Do I have a vehicle? Is there a care cab company nearby? What are the steps I'm going to take? And then we have to start planning on a long-term purpose. Is my bathroom big enough? Can I get my chair in there and be able to do a turn or be able to back in and out easily? All things that we have to start taking into mind. Can we get it into our kitchen? Can I open my fridge with inside my chair? So just buying a chair or getting a chair prescribed to you is not always the first step. You kind of have to start planning out a long-term thing here. Okay, what can I do with this thing? Because again, we'll find ourselves in the scenario like we found earlier, where we're asking about getting an all-terrain chair. The chair they prescribed you originally doesn't work for you. Now, I don't know the name brand of the chair you're using, but in the situation for being able to go off-road and stuff, you're looking at more like an F5, which is a permobile chair, or maybe an M3 or an M5. Those chairs are going to allow for a little bit more rugged terrain versus a chair from, let's say, Golden Technologies. So there's another thing we have to consider about: what do we like to do in our free time? Will our power mobility work for the things I like to do? So let's say some people like to go shopping at a mall. Well, a lighter chair with smaller wheels generally is going to be fine for those kinds of activities. But if you wanted to go to, let's say, the state fair and go into some of the shops and some of the vendors, or even in to see some of the livestock stuff, they generally don't move through there very well. Even though the building may be ADA accessible, it doesn't necessarily always work. Because there's going to be lips on doorways and things like that some of the smaller lightweight chairs don't work for. And this is where it's really important, like I said earlier, to find somebody who's going to advocate for you and listen to what you want your chair to do, or your other mobile devices. I know we had talked, or somebody was asking about getting a power scooter. Power scooters are great, generally not covered by insurance, however, because it's considered more of a temporary device, not a long-term device. So that's where we kind of run into some issues there. So I know it's kind of, I'm sounding like Debbie Downer right now with some of the comments, but I want people to understand that getting a mobile device can be very difficult regardless of the diagnosis. And I understand the difficulties with ALS, and so do doctors, and so do insurance companies. Insurance companies, you have to remember, they're profit oriented. They're not always customer oriented. So they are oriented towards making money versus just helping people like they should be. And that's why it's so important to have an advocate on your behalf. And that's why I always stress to anybody, if you're looking at getting a mobile device, work with a professional, and do that. Now, I'm not saying necessarily me. There's hundreds of companies that do what we do, but we want to make sure that you are getting to where you need to be. And many companies will go out of their way to work with you and your insurance company to get you the right devices. Can we always win those battles with Medicare and Medicaid? Not always, but 95% of the time we do. I know that I just worked with a family that has ALS. They had purchased a vehicle. The vehicle was not big enough to fit a large F5 wheelchair. That's a 500-pound wheelchair with the large wheels, and it sits really high off the floor. It was just not built for it. They couldn't fit in there. They bought it a couple of years ago when they first got diagnosed, and they were thinking, yep, our manual wheelchair works great in here. We're never going to have to upgrade it. They didn't think the long-term scenario. And then all of a sudden they're here, and they're upside down on their loan, as we call it, where they owed way more money than what the vehicle was worth. So we worked with them very, very, very hard. No insurance company was going to help them. I worked with our corporate office, and we ended up taking a loss to sell them a van, but we helped them out in the situation they were in. And it's just, we can't always do that, but that's a scenario where working with a professional company to solve a problem, it is definitely going to help. And now we got them into a vehicle that the wheelchair fits in comfortably. And not only that, is that now the husband doesn't sit in the middle row, he can actually sit up front and have a conversation with his wife, which is huge. I don't know about you, but quality of life is like so important. And we take what we do very, very seriously. So we want to be able to help you, just like any other DME company does. So when you're dealing with a mobility situation, please don't hesitate to reach out. Some of us are just great resources. We're here to answer questions and help in any way we can. I'm more than happy to take some more specific questions towards equipment. I know that we had some questions from some of the folks on the call here. So if I can help in any way, just, shoot me a question.
So the question is about cushions.
All right, so we were asking about what's a better quality cushion. If you're going to be in a chair on a long-term basis, you want to get one that's going to kind of form to your shape. and they have a lot that are done with adjustable air. And I find those to be the most successful for long-term sitting. They're going to prevent the sores that you could generally get from sitting in a cushion too long. So just making sure that we're going to speak to our physician or our physical therapist about, preventing sores. And as long as if we're starting to experience anything where we start to see sores, that's almost a given that the insurance company is going to allow you to do this, because they don't want you to get any infections or anything like that. And generally sores on your backside are not good. They don't heal very quickly. So this is something that can help us get you into one of those more air quality cushions that are kind of like almost like a sleep number bed, as I like to say, but it's a sleep number bed for your backside. Okay, I can go from there. Well, it sounds like we're talking about add-ons to both the chair and then possibly some stuff because we just moved recently. That's another one where a home's need analysis would be huge. Getting somebody to come out and see what they can do to make some adjustments to make life easier for you. Now, as far as tables go, you can get some of those furniture stores where they have the adjustable tables that go up in different heights and stuff to allow you to sit better at a table. And that would be what I would suggest doing. That's more of a furniture store kind of thing. So it's generally not going to be covered by insurances, but it's going to give you a little bit more freedom to be able to enjoy that meal with family. As far as that goes. Now, when you moved in, it sounds like you have the eye control stuff. I've heard about that. It's pretty fancy. Congratulations. You have some of the latest and greatest technology in the world. However, that stuff has to be reconfigured when you move into a new space. And that, again, would suggest having someone come out and help readjust some of that for you to make sure that it works with you properly.
And we do have table risers, and like we do have little things to put under your, it depends on the kind of table you have and the kind of legs you have, but we do have some of those.
Perfect. Good solution right there. Even just a simple riser too. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to do that. Some of those simple devices, like they make things to raise beds up and stuff too. So all that works.
And I'm a follow-up. I don't mind the video. Can we get a company like you to do that assessment, or do we need to go through a wheelchair company?
Your physical therapist, your clinic can do that. I don't know, Aaron, I'll leave the rest of the question to you.
Okay, yeah. So your physical therapist would generally come out and do the assessment if you request it. And then they would refer you to a company that probably might specialize in the particular thing that you might need in the home, especially moving into a new space. That's a huge deal to have somebody come out and physically take a look, see what some of the challenges might be. So then we can kind of prescribe the things that would be able to solve some of those things. As far as my company, we don't do a whole lot of home access right now because we are required by the state of Minnesota to have some licenses. And because my company is relatively new to Minnesota, we don't have those licenses in place. Yes, one of those is an elevator license. It's very difficult to get one of those in the state of Minnesota, but there are specialty companies in the state that specifically work with home access stuff. So they can definitely help you out in any situation within your home.
Good to know. Other questions? Other things you've run into that? And welcome, Andre and Tara.
Did we get any other questions? Otherwise, some of
I think we have one coming.
I have a lot, so I'm trying to give other people room. What are your thoughts on temporary ramps? I bought one, but it's kind of too short and steep, so only the wheelchair can go up and down, and not me.
temporary ramps are not a very good idea because like you said, they're temporary. They're not necessarily designed for a long-term use. In your situation, you probably have a larger chair, I would assume, because it sounds like you have a joystick. Those chairs have a lot of weight, anywhere between 350 pounds to 400, 500 pounds. Adding a person on top of that, now you got a 600-pound chair. You know, it could get very difficult and very dangerous, especially with you on an occupied temporary ramp. I would definitely suggest against that. Look for more of a long-term solution. Like I said, temporary solutions are great to solve an immediate issue, but we always have to plan for that long-term. Okay, here's where I'm going to be in 6 months, or here's where I'm going to be in a year. Otherwise, all you're doing is spending money on something that's not going to solve the problem. And that's the last thing we want to do, is have you in a situation where you're spending money that you don't necessarily need to spend, when you can just spend a little bit more at the front end and have a long-term solution, not to have to worry about things for a while.
I will send in the email follow-up, I will send the list that we have for the independent living, like the people who help build the ramps and design the ramps. So, because it's a really good question.
Hello, people.
Hello, Andre.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
I'm well. Do you mind being videotaped?
Nope, nope.
Okay.
I love the spotlight. A natural born ham. But my question is, I have the eye gaze technology with the Tobel, infrared eye sensors, and it does not work outdoors. Have you come up with, is there any other way, or have you found any solutions to shielding the sunlight from the screen? Because that's the problem. And anyone else who's been using that system.
So there is something in development right now. They call it eye safe lasers. It's basically a similar laser thing, except for it's not the infrared. It's more of a green color. The military uses it a lot for nighttime and daytime activities with their special glasses that they have to see distance. So it is something that's in development. Is it out yet? No, they're still testing it. But because of ALS's importance in our society and how of a much of a situation that we're trying to solve with it, they're working really diligently to get it to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not Andre. Aaron, do you know who is doing that?
That is being run by a couple different companies.
Okay.
Actually, Microsoft and Google are both doing a home access program right now. So they're actually putting a lot of money in. Last I heard, it was about $7 million each into the development of these technologies. So pretty soon, the new Google glasses are going to be able to do everything. And supposedly the glasses themselves are going to be what operates everything. So we'll see how that works. That's Google's kind of take. Microsoft is going more of the eyesight technology, where you point your eyes, the green laser is supposed to activate things.
Gotta love corporate competition.
Are they looking into using like those Oculus, those kind of glasses that you put on to stare at a wheelchair?
The Oculus is more of your virtual reality type unit. The Google glasses are a system that operates like a computer via your glasses. So like the glasses you have on, you'd still be able to have your prescription, but they'd be able to actually see like almost like a computer screen, and your eye contact from how you move your eyes will actually allow the menu to pick things for you.
Makes me dizzy thinking about it.
It's some pretty advanced technology. I'm pretty excited that it's out there. They're working on it. How quickly it gets to the market, I don't know. They're investing millions of dollars though, so I'm assuming they're very close to the technology. Otherwise, they wouldn't invest that much.
Mm-hmm.
I have another comment about sort of the tabletop heights and things like that. And that's the importance of getting a chair elevation system built into your original power chair. And again, that's not covered by Medicare usually, so you have to get a special workaround. And I've worked through the Gleason Foundation to get that. They are very good about sponsoring that added piece. And the thing that I find is if I go to a restaurant that has like a bar area, I can use a high top table. And I can just rise up to that. And then my wife and I, she sits on a high stool and I sit in my chair with a elevated function. And that works out really well. So
Yeah, the Steve Gleason Foundation has been really generous in providing that to just, I don't know anyone they've told no, so.
Yeah, there's some great organizations out there working very hard to help folks out. And the rising chair, that's huge. The F5 unit is one of the chairs that has that feature. It's amazing. They even have a standing feature that's coming out now too to help people stand up. So there's some pretty interesting stuff that's on the way. And we're going to definitely see a wave of new technology coming into the mobility market here pretty soon.
Lola, did you have anything else? You said you had lots of questions.
Oh yeah. I was Googling and I saw a mobile power wheelchair. My PT said insurance doesn't cover it, but is there any way to justify it? You have any ideas on that?
I do. There are a couple of different ways you could approach this. Generally, this is something where you might have to get multiple organizations or third parties involved. Your insurance company may agree to pay part of it. And the reason being is you justify, hey, I have this power mobility solution right now. Are you willing to cover what it costs to get this particular unit, and then working with third parties to kind of get those additional items that you need? So let's say you want to go from, I'm going to use Golden Technology 4-wheel or 6-wheel wheelchair. It's just a front wheelchair, very basic, costs about 12 grand. And you want to get into something that's 25 grand. They might be willing to say, okay, yep, you've had that. Here's the expected life expectancy of that particular unit you're in. Most of them are 5 to 7 years. If for some reason in that 5 to 7 years that chair is starting to have issues or starting to have breakdowns, or you've had to have it repaired multiple times, it's kind of a motivator for the insurance company to put you into something a little bit more safe. And that's where you can kind of start to work the system a little bit. It's kind of tricky. It's not always a done deal. I've done one where we got somebody into an F5 wheelchair, but they were going from a $25,000 wheelchair into a $65,000 wheelchair. It's a lot of work to make it happen, but we did get it covered. It took some time. It was like a 6-month process.
So with this, I have a really expensive for mobile, but I'm trying to, instead of getting a manual wheelchair, I wanted to get, there's a power wheelchair that folds and can be thrown in the back of the car. And my insurance, I'm lucky, will cover the manual but they won't cover like a manual, a power mobile wheelchair.
Okay, so it sounds like you're talking about getting a manual wheelchair with power on it. Is that what we're saying? Okay.
Correct.
So that's a little bit different. So now that's going to come down to medical coding. So your HipPix codes aren't going to match up, and that's why it's not going to be covered. So HipPix is a code that doctors and nurses use to assign to a certain piece of equipment, and that code is billed under a certain way. So Medicare will pay for the manual chair itself, but not the mobile stuff because it's not coded properly, and there's no way to really code that correctly to get you into to have it covered. That's a tricky one. So that's one where they'll cover part of it, but you're responsible for the rest. See where I'm going with that? That's something you could do, but I don't necessarily know if that's a good solution or not. Those folding wheelchairs with the power on them, they're not very reliable. And that's where my concern would come in for you. Don't want to get you stuck anywhere. You know, it's difficult.
I also want to go back to something that you said earlier, Aaron, about thinking long-term.
Mhm.
And Lola, my concern would be, the power chair that you can fold up works as long as you can get out of the chair and transfer into the vehicle. And who knows how long you'll be able to do that. So that would be my concern.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. That sets my mind at ease. Sorry, last question. I'm about to be approved for the caddy waiver and was wondering if you know about any grants to get a vehicle that's wheelchair accessible and what specs I should be looking for. I would have to, it looks like right now I would have to purchase the vehicle and then get a grant to make it accessible.
Okay. So here's where the confusion is. You don't have to get a vehicle that's not already converted. It's a big misconception. So the misconception is that they'll give you a grant for the conversion. And you're like, okay, that's the switch to vehicle over. No, they will pay for any vehicle, like I have example on my lot that's already converted, but they only cover the cost of the conversion. Now, the hard part is getting that additional cost for the chassis, which is the van itself, minus the conversion. So I'll use an example. So I got a 2021 Honda out there. The conversion was 35,000. The caddy waiver would cover the 35,000, and then you'd be responsible for the additional 30,000, the cost of the van. Now, there are grants and programs out there that do cover that additional cost. It's just a matter of applying for them and trying them to get them approved. Sometimes, however, the county, depending on their budget, will do a one-time, they'll cover everything. So depending on the size of your caddy waiver award is really going to determine what they're willing to do for you. And they may say, okay, yep, you can have this money, but you only get this much. And then that kind of limits what kind of vehicle you could get into. But there are a lot of options out there. The downside is there's just not a lot of inventory out there. Just like the regular car market, our market is struggling to find vehicles to be able to convert and make them wheelchair accessible.
Thank you. It was very helpful. I appreciate it.
Very welcome. Thank you.
So I have a question about repairs.
Mhm.
So are all repairs of your chair covered?
Yes and no. Repairs on your chair, in most cases, they'll be covered by your insurance if it's within the expected life expectancy of the chair. So that's a key thing you need to determine with your insurance company. What do they consider the life expectancy of your power chair? Like I said, generally it's anywhere between 5 and 7 years, depending on the battery life and things like that. Now, if a battery goes bad, they're going to call that maintenance. You'd be responsible for it. If you need to replace a tire, maintenance. So what they determine as maintenance and what they determine as expected life expectancy, those are all play factors in there. So yes, do they generally cover the cost of repairs? Yes, if you had an electrical board go bad and it's not communicating properly, yes, they're going to cover that 95% of the time, unless it's like past the expectancy life of the chair. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Jan? Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, it's Rob Hood. There were some questions about vans. And there's a company in Minneapolis that just does van conversions for wheelchairs. And the name of the company is Rolex, ROLLX Vans. They're located on Highway 13, West Highway 13.
And this is,
and
and this is
Savage.
all on our website too.
Okay,
So
then I won't
Yep.
go through it. Yeah. I
Yep.
just want to point out though,
I'll send out the list from our website to you in the follow-up email. Know too that we also have people selling them within the ALS community. So
yes.
that can happen too.
I just want to point out that I have been to Rolex and they're very understanding, and they have used ones that they're willing to sell, or if you buy a van, they're willing to convert it. They were very amenable to anything you want to do, and that's all they do.
Yep, we do that as well.
Oh,
MobilityWorks, as well as Cummings Mobility, which is another one of my competitors. Yes, I'll name all my competitors. I have no problem with that. Rolex is another company. They're down near the Savage area. So we do have multiple companies within the state of Minnesota that do those conversions. I can gladly take a vehicle and convert it for you. It's completely up to you. Generally, there's some things that we're looking for and that we need to look out for, like long-term. Like we said, we're always thinking long-term. If your vehicle has a whole bunch of rust on it, because it's seen a lot of Minnesota winters, probably not a good vehicle to convert. Why spend $25,000 on a vehicle you have that's not going to last for that period of time? So we always try to look at the long-term scenario. That's what we kind of do here. And they do that over at Rolex and Cummings Mobility as well. So our goal is not to put you in a piece of junk and say, here you go. We sell used vehicles. We do a lot of recycling of ALS customers. We have some up here where that's exactly how I solved an issue that we had with an ALS customers. I got one from another customer and I got it to somebody else. We worked it out.
I have a question. We purchased a temporary ramp from one of those that folds up like a suitcase, you know, a 7-foot ramp, just to be able to get into my daughter's home because she has 3 steps to get in. So I know it's technically not as long as it needs to be ADA compliant strictly, but do you think I'll have any problem, or do you have any tips for going up and down a ramp that's steeper than it probably should be?
Manual chair or electric or power chair?
Power chair.
Okay. I generally would recommend going up backwards. And there's a reason for that. It's just going to feel more comfortable. And just like coming down, you're going to want to go backwards with an assistant behind you. It's for your protection. And just like going up, you'll have the person in front of you. So if you're going up the ramp, I'm going to try to use my hands here, having somebody there to just so if you start to lean forward, they can help stabilize you. And going backwards, it's more so the chair doesn't slide too fast. It's to kind of slow your pace down. Either way, it's going to be scary, especially with a higher angle. One of the first things I did when I was hired here was actually I sat in a wheelchair for 2 weeks. I wanted my customers' experience. I wanted to know what you guys were going through. So I got it. I went in and out of vans. I went around the showroom here to make sure that it was ADA accessible, not only like that, but to see what it was like. And I don't know about anybody else, but even our vans that have the kneeling feature that kind of get lower to the ground, that's 30 degrees lower. It's still scary. Going down forward is very, very scary. And that's, you know, I don't want you to have to experience that. So that's where the backwards thing is going to feel a lot better. It's for your protection. We don't want anybody to get hurt. So I always suggest going down backwards. Just for kind of being safe about everything, and going up backwards too, because that slope going the other way is going to feel very scary.
That's what I was afraid of. Already I've gone down some slopes and I feel like I'm going to pitch out of the chair. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't want you to have that feeling. If I can help you avoid it, that's what I'm shooting for.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One strategy you might employ there is, first of all, make sure you have your seatbelt on. And then if you can do the whole chair tipping back, like just the seat, So your just the seat adjustment that you have available to you, if you're going to that backward tilt, it's easier to go down the ramp, but something as steep as yours, I would be very, very careful of. Because I just the other day, my van didn't kneel, and I was going up the ramp, and I did a little wheelie at the top, and that's scary.
Mhm.
Just to feel like you're tipping backwards at the top of a ramp is not a good feeling. So, but going up backwards, that's kind of hard to do if you're steering yourself with a joystick. Or even if somebody else is driving you, it's very hard to drive a joystick feature backwards on something narrow like a ramp, especially a temporary ramp. Okay, I'll get out of here. So I'm sorry.
No, you're
No, it's
perfectly
just
fine.
making me anxious hearing about that.
No, and I learned something new there too. Using the lean feature to kind of give yourself a different feeling that's a great idea. And I wouldn't know because unfortunately I didn't get the best chair to play with for the 2 weeks I had to play with one. So I didn't get all those cool features. I had a joystick though, and going backwards, it does present some difficulties. It can be done. Like I said, that's where that companion or having somebody with you is huge. They help guide you, and it's a slow process, especially on a steep ramp. You want to go slow and just follow instructions and work together, and you'll be able to do both just fine.
Thank you. I'm going up there in a couple of weeks, so I'm getting a little nervous, but thank you.
That was a great question. Thank you, because my dad wants to go to my sister's house, and he pops his front tires going up the lean on the van. So thank you guys. That was awesome to know. So he's outside. He departed. So I'm here hanging out with you guys.
Thanks for doing that. We have about less than 10 minutes left. Other questions that you can think of?
Aaron, do you recommend an all or a lighter wheelchair? Like there's like 50-pound wheelchairs out there that we could, because my dad's about 200 pounds, his chair is 400. So we have that 600-pound. I cannot move him when if it's stuck, it's stuck. So we want to know if I took like some big burly guys with me out on the property and with like a 50-pound chair that still has the joystick, still has some of the power, what are our chances of leaving him there or bringing him home?
I definitely would recommend against it. Reason being, I've seen the trach, obviously. Your lighter weight chairs are generally not going to be designed to be able to handle those additional equipment that might be needed. So let's say we have a non-invasive ventilating system or something like that. You don't really have the space to store it properly. And then if you're going on a lot of bumps and stuff, you may cause some issues. In his situation, what I would look at is maybe one of the all-terrain vehicles. There is a company that lets you rent them, and that might be the way to go, so that he could get that experience and get that time outside. Because I don't know if you want to make the investment. I believe buying one of those things is about $65,000 to $80,000. I've looked at getting them for a few customers here too. So I would definitely call around. I think you can get one, and they kind of look like they have like the tracks like they're on a tank, and they're designed to go out into the woods. And there are some places that'll even have like an area where they can go out and do that. I know he would probably like to go out on his property, but maybe being able just to get out and go into some woods in general would be great. And these things are awesome. I've seen them go over like mud puddles and all kinds of stuff. So people use them for all kinds of things.
Who are you referring to that I could rent that from?
Let me find it here.
So this property is very important to my dad, and it's something he bought 40 something years ago. And I want to get them out there at least one more time, and especially before the weather turns. So my clock is ticking on this for sure. But yes, we don't want to spend that kind of money. And maybe I've seen that you can rent stuff for like a day or 2 days up to a week. So that would be something perfect.
Yeah, so it's called Accessibility Wisconsin is the name of the company.
Access what?
Accessibility Wisconsin. Let's see if I can.
And
copy it.
I will add this to the,
Yeah, I'm gonna
email.
grab.
Thank you.
I'm gonna grab the link here. I'll throw it
oh,
in
thanks.
the chat function here. Let me just grab it. Oops. No, I didn't want to do that. Back. There you go, messing things up. That's what but they are a great organization. I've referred a few people out there just to be able to get that opportunity. So if that's what you're interested in having Dad do, I'd be more than happy to give it my blessing. I think they
Well,
do
part
enjoy
of
this.
it's the independence. This is his property. He's always been able to walk it. He's
Mhm.
always been able to go where he wants to go. And now that's unfortunately because of ALS changed and
Mhm.
age as well.
Mhm.
And so this is something that would be a fun blessing.
Yeah.
So I shot that link. It's in the chat, so you can grab that. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
I've worked with these folks a few times, helping some other folks out too, and I think they're a great organization. So
Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Aaron. Thank you so much, Aaron.